The latest as far as the West Asia crisis that continues, where Israel's security cabinet is set to discuss the ceasefire deal that's been brokered between France and the US and try and find some sort of peace deal that could work in the long term. G7 and Arab ministers await news on the proposed ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah. The conflict continues to simmer. In the latest, multiple explosions were seen in Beirut's southern suburbs today morning, and the explosions caused loud booms and huge plumes of smoke. They were captured following each other consecutively on Tuesday. On the other hand, Hezbollah rockets and drone attacks on northern Israel seriously injured 2 elderly people and a soldier. In response, Israeli warplanes carried out strikes on the terror group's Lebanese stronghold. As the war drags on, Israel's security cabinet is now set to convene very shortly to discuss the proposed ceasefire. Among issues that remain is an Israeli demand to reserve the right to act should Hezbollah violate its obligations under the emerging deal. On the diplomatic front, outgoing EU foreign policy chief Josep Borrell has called for increased pressure on Israel to blunt extremists in the government who are refusing to accept the deal. Speaking on the sidelines of the G7 foreign ministers meeting in Italy, Borrell warned that if a ceasefire is not implemented, Lebanon, quote-unquote, will fall apart. Listen in.
In Lebanon, there is no excuses for a ceasefire. On the proposal agreement brokered by the US and France, Israel has all security concerns. There is not an excuse for not implementing a ceasefire. Otherwise, Lebanon will fall apart.
Now, the human cost of the war keeps on rising. Hundreds of mourners gathered on Monday under pouring rain for a ceremony ahead of a funeral of an Israeli Moldovan rabbi who was killed in the UAE. The UAE police have arrested 3 Uzbek nationals for killing of the rabbi, an attack that's raised concern for the Israeli community in the country. In fact, let's quickly now get in an update from Melissa Weiss, who is executive editor of the Jewish Insider, joining me from Tel Aviv to give us a sense of how things are unfolding right now. Melissa, thanks much for speaking to me. Talk to us about the ceasefire deal that's likely to, of course, be taken up by the cabinet, the prospects of it being passed, and how that could change the entire war from here on.
Sure. So the Israeli Security Cabinet is set to vote in the next few hours on whether or not to accept the proposal for a 60-day temporary ceasefire. It is expected to pass, though there might be some opposition. But ultimately, the question of what happens with the ceasefire comes down to enforcement. Will UNIFIL, will international troops, will there be enforcement of the parameters of the agreement? We know from what happened in 2016 with UN Security Council Resolution 1701, there was an agreement that clearly laid out the stipulations that each side would follow. We know that Hezbollah breached those agreements, and that is how we ended up in this situation today. So the key question comes down to whether or not the international community will be able or willing to enforce the stipulations in the ceasefire proposal.
All right, Melissa, thanks much for giving us that detail. And of course, we wait for what really comes out of that ceasefire deal and proposal.